Usually when we talk about like a language barrier, there's this expectation of literal mechanical failure.
Right, exactly.
Like you're in a foreign country and you're frantically pointing at a menu, trying your absolute hardest not to accidentally order something completely unexpected. You anticipate the friction, you know? You expect to be misunderstood.
Yeah, because it's a visible problem. I mean, you have a mismatched dictionary in your head. And both parties are actively aware that they lack the necessary vocabulary to communicate seamlessly. The friction is a known variable.
But then you step into the world of intimate relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, the most profound, devastating language barriers happen when two people are speaking the exact same language, fluently.
Oh, for sure.
They know all the words. They understand the grammar.
Yeah.
And yet they might as well be speaking from two entirely different planets.
Which happens because they are running entirely different emotional operating systems. I mean, they are using the same vocabulary, but the psychological architecture supporting those words is completely different.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a truly fascinating set of notes, research, and dialogues that unpack a very specific cross-cultural relationship.
It really is incredible material.
It is. We're going to examine the relationship between a Ugandan woman, who we'll call Connie, and a Danish man, Matthias. They both speak perfect English, they're deeply in love, and yet...
They find themselves staring at each other across this massive, invisible canyon.
Exactly. A canyon that we are going to call the Sorry Gap.
It is a phenomenal case study for anyone trying to understand human connection, because this isn't just about a couple bickering over, mundane daily tasks or scheduling conflicts.
Right. It's way deeper than whose turn it is to do the dishes.
Much deeper. This is a profound look into how our society, our geography, and even our macroeconomics literally program our baseline empathy.
Wow.
Yeah, it dictates how we show love and how we react when someone we care about is in pain.
So consider the simple question. Are you okay? Just 3 words. To one person, asking that question feels perfectly respectful. It is the absolute height of consideration and emotional maturity.
Yes.
But to the other person, asking, are you okay? In a moment of crisis, is shockingly cold. It feels exactly like watching someone actively drown in a river, standing safely on the shore and yelling out,
"Hey, is the water chilly?"
right, is the water chilly?
That is a heavy, jarring image, but it perfectly encapsulates the visceral friction we are going to explore. Because when you are the one drowning, a diagnostic question feels like a fundamental betrayal of the relationship.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the absolute core of this philosophical divide. We are looking at 2 entirely different default reactions to human suffering. We have instinctive empathy on one side and individual autonomy on the other.
Let's explore the Ugandan perspective first, which operates on this concept of instinctive empathy. In the source material, Connie paints a very clear picture of how this works in practice.
Oh, the scraped knee example, right?
Okay. Exactly. Imagine someone gets hit by a car, or even just trips and falls on the sidewalk. Or maybe they just received a phone call that they failed a major exam.
Okay, a clear moment of distress.
Right. In her Ugandan culture, the immediate, undeniable response from anyone who witnesses this, even a total stranger, is to say, "Oh, sorry."
And to be clear, you didn't drive the car.
No.
You didn't push them on the sidewalk. You certainly didn't grade their exam.
That is the crucial distinction. It has absolutely nothing to do with guilt, causality, or personal responsibility. Sorry. In this context is an emotional covering.
An emotional covering. I like that phrasing.
The sources describe it beautifully as the verbal equivalent of blowing on a child's wound. Think about it. When a child scrapes their knee, blowing on it doesn't medically heal the broken skin.
Right. It doesn't coagulate the blood. There's no medicinal property to breath. It doesn't fix the physical problem at all.
But psychologically, it is a profound act of shared humanity. It is an immediate mechanism to soothe the nervous system. It says, "I see your pain, and I am bringing myself into this moment with you so you don't have to experience it alone." To withhold that word in Ugandan culture, to see obvious pain and not offer that immediate sorry, is to actively deny the other person's humanity.
So it's basically an intentional withholding of warmth, almost like watching someone freeze and refusing to acknowledge the cold.
Exactly. It's an incredibly communal way of existing. The underlying logic seems to be, you feel pain, therefore I feel pain, because we belong to the same human fabric.
But then we have the Danish perspective. Matthias.
Yes, Matthias.
When faced with that exact same scenario, someone trips or someone is visibly distraught over a failed exam, the Danish default is not sorry. It is, do okay.
Ugh.
You okay?
Which, to the Ugandan ear, sounds utterly absurd. If I am bleeding on the pavement or if I am sobbing over a test score, the answer is self-evident. Of course I am not okay.
Right. It feels like a profoundly stupid comment in that moment.
Hmm.
I'm bleeding on the pavement. What do you mean, am I okay?
But this is where we have to look closely at the underlying software of the Danish mindset. This reaction is not rooted in coldness or a lack of empathy.
Even if it feels cold to someone else.
Right. It is rooted in a deeply ingrained, fiercely protected respect for personal boundaries and individual autonomy.
Okay, walk me through that. How is asking a question respecting a boundary?
Well, if a Danish person walks up to a stranger who just tripped and immediately says, "I am so sorry," they are making a massive assumption about that person's internal state.
Oh, I see. They're projecting an emotion onto the victim before the victim has a chance to process what just happened.
They're guessing how that person feels. And in Danish culture, guessing someone else's internal emotional state is a subtle form of overstepping. It's presumptuous.
Wait, really? Just assuming someone is sad they fell is presumptuous?
Yes, because the Danish cultural framework places a massive premium on self-determination by asking, "Are you okay?" You are giving the victim the ultimate respect. You are giving them the space to define their own reality.
You're handing them the microphone instead of speaking for them.
Exactly. You're letting them set the terms of the interaction. You're letting them say, "No, actually, I'm fine. It was just a clumsy stumble. I'm just embarrassed." Or, "I am completely furious that the sidewalk is broken."
Or, I am severely injured.
Right. You aren't forcing your own emotional reaction onto their experience. You are prioritizing their autonomy over your own instinct to comfort.
I love this. I have an analogy for this that I think really crystallizes the difference.
Let's hear it.
It's like the difference between someone throwing a heavy wool blanket over you the exact second they see you shiver versus someone walking up, maintaining a respectful distance, and asking, "Would you like a blanket?"
That is a phenomenal way to visualize the mechanics of this interaction. Let's break down why that matters.
Because the first option, throwing the blanket immediately, is unquestioning warmth. You don't even have to ask for it. You don't have to articulate your need. The community just provides it. But the second option is the ultimate respect for your bodily autonomy. Because, I mean, maybe you were just stretching, not shivering. Maybe you have a sensory aversion to wool. Maybe you prefer to warm up by walking.
And if someone throws the blanket without asking, they are imposing their own solution onto your body. They are deciding what is best for you, which can feel incredibly smothering if you belong to a culture that values individual space.
But hold on. Let me push back on this a little bit, because I think a lot of listeners might be struggling to see the downside of the Ugandan approach.
Okay, push back.
Isn't sorry just universally polite? Even if I don't need the wool blanket, I can still appreciate the gesture, right? How does a Dane actually view a random sorry from a bystander? Do they legitimately get offended by someone trying to be nice?
It's less about taking outright offense and more about experiencing profound confusion, which then morphs into a feeling of intrusion.
Intrusion.
Yeah. To a Dane, an unearned sorry, an apology where there is no direct causality or fault, feels irrelevant to the situation. Think about it logically. The bystander didn't cause the accident. So why are they trying to insert themselves into the narrative of the accident?
Oh, wow. They are claiming a piece of the trauma that doesn't belong to them. They are making themselves a character in a play they weren't cast in.
That is a great way to put it. To the Danish mindset, it feels like the person is trespassing on your private emotional experience. The psychological goals of the two responses are entirely opposed.
Right.
For the Ugandan, the goal of the word sorry is therapeutic. It is meant to provide immediate comfort and validation. But for the Dane, the goal of "are you okay" is diagnostic.
Agnostic.
Yes, it is designed to identify the nuance of the situation without intruding on the individual's right to process it privately first.
That is absolutely fascinating. They are looking at the exact same physical event, a scraped knee, a failed test, and their brains are deploying entirely different rescue protocols based on what their culture has taught them is the most respectful way to treat a human being.
And we have to remember, this is just the micro level. This is just how they react to a stranger tripping on the sidewalk or a minor inconvenience.
Right, the small stuff.
But that begs a massive question. If an entire culture defaults to verbal check-ins and strict autonomy instead of physical communal action, where does that come from? It can't just be a random personality quirk that developed in a vacuum. vacuum.
Right, cultures don't just randomly decide to be different for no reason.
Exactly. What happens when a government or a societal structure literally steps in and changes the rules of survival?
Oh man. This leads us right into the most mind-expanding part of the source material. We need to talk about the decoupling of love from survival.
Right.
We are talking about the welfare state effect.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is arguably the most profound point in the entire analysis.
I completely agree.
Because it demonstrates that macroeconomics literally rewrites romantic love languages. The way a nation taxes its citizens and distributes wealth fundamentally alters how two people express affection in their living room.
Let's lay this out clearly for everyone listening. In Kani's culture in Uganda, the model of love is heavily rooted in provision. Love is demonstrated through tangible actions and sacrifices.
Right.
The source example highlights things like a parent paying school fees or a partner stepping up financially to provide security for the home. That action is the "I love you."
It is an unspoken, visceral duty. In environments where the social safety net is either weak or non-existent, love is not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It is an active defense against the harsh realities of survival.
It has to be.
If you love someone, you shield them from the economic and physical vulnerabilities of the world. Action is the primary currency of affection, because action is what keeps people alive.
Right. Because if you don't step up and provide the school fees, the child doesn't go to school. If you don't provide the healthcare funds, the person doesn't get treated. The stakes are existential.
Therefore, a good partner, a loving partner, is defined by their willingness and ability to carry that existential burden with you. They are a co-survivor.
Okay, now contrast that with Denmark. Denmark is a massive, highly functioning welfare state. The government handles the basic survival provisions. Education is free. Healthcare is free.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a robust social safety net that catches you if you fall into unemployment or illness. So the state itself has taken over the role of the ultimate provider.
Which creates a massive generational psychological shift. Because the state handles the mechanics of survival, love is suddenly decoupled from basic needs.
Decoupled, that's the critical word here.
Exactly.
So if a husband in Denmark doesn't need to prove his love by paying for his wife's health care or his kids' school fees because the government already took care of it through taxes,
right.
How does he prove his love?
Yeah.
Like, what does he actually do to show he cares?
The entire landscape of affection shifts into the realm of the emotional. When survival is guaranteed by the state, love becomes almost exclusively about verbal expression, deep psychological conversations, physical touch, and constantly checking in on the other person's internal feelings.
Because that's the only territory left for the romantic partner to occupy.
Precisely. When the government plays the role of the co-survivor, the romantic partner shifts from being a shield against the world to being an emotional sounding board.
That makes so much sense.
The focus of the relationship moves entirely from external provision to internal communication. The definition of a good partner changes from someone who brings home the resources to someone who understands your deepest psychological complexities.
Which makes total sense historically and economically.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this raises a really tough question.
Okay, what is it?
If the state pays for everything, and love essentially just becomes this exercise in constant communication and boundary-respecting talk,
Yeah.
what happens when a real non-state-covered crisis actually hits? Does the Danish verbal approach completely fall flat for someone expecting the Ugandan action approach?
That is exactly the friction point where these relationships can fracture. If you are raised to believe that love means stepping in, taking over a burden, and acting as a shield, then a partner who just wants to talk about your feelings while you are actively carrying that burden is going to feel incredibly frustrating.
It feels useless. Like if I'm carrying a boulder, I don't want you to ask me how the boulder makes me feel. I want you to help me carry the boulder.
It feels profoundly useless to the Ugandan mindset, yes. But to the Dane, talking about the feelings is the work of love. To the Dane, ignoring the psychological toll of the boulder to just mechanically lift it would be a failure of emotional intimacy.
This perfectly transitions us into what happens when a real, devastating crisis strikes the relationship. Because this is where the verbal check-in goes from feeling perhaps a bit useless or annoying to feeling outright insulting.
We need to explore the mechanics of trauma, timing, and what Connie explicitly calls the stupid question.
Let's set the stage, because Matthias, the Danish partner, actually has a very specific, almost clinical methodology for dealing with a crisis. He doesn't just ask, "Are you okay?" arbitrarily. There's a whole architectural framework behind his response.
He does, and from a psychological standpoint, his approach is incredibly sound. Matthias breaks down the timeline of a crisis into 4 distinct phases of human trauma.
Okay, let's go through these.
Phase 1 is shock, Phase 2 is reaction, Phase 3 is processing, and Phase 4 is reorientation.
I want to pause and actually explain the mechanics of these phases because they dictate his entire communication strategy.
Right.
Phase 1 is shock. What is actually happening in the brain during this phase?
Shock is the brain's immediate neurological buffer against overwhelming information. It is a state of numbness or disbelief. The system shuts down emotional processing because the raw data of the crisis is too immense to handle all at once.
So during shock, a person might seem detached or silent or eerily calm.
Yes, exactly.
Then we move to phase 2, which is reaction.
This is when the buffer wears off. The emotional reality hits the nervous system. This is characterized by visible distress, crying, yelling, intense panic, or profound sadness. It is the raw, unfiltered emotional response to the trauma.
Followed by phase 3, processing.
Processing is the cognitive phase. This is where the brain starts trying to make sense of what happened. You start analyzing the event, asking, why did this happen? Looking at the variables and trying to construct a narrative that explains the crisis.
And finally, phase 4, reorientation.
Reorientation is the acceptance phase. The trauma has been integrated into the person's reality, and they begin to look forward, asking, okay, given this near terrible reality, what are my next steps? How do I rebuild or adapt?
Okay, so we have shock, reaction, processing, reorientation. Now imagine a massive crisis hits the relationship. Matthias views the question, are you okay, as the perfect diagnostic tool. Why?
Because it allows his partner to reveal exactly which of those 4 phases she is currently inhabiting.
So it's not actually a yes or no question in his mind.
No, not at all. It is a diagnostic prompt. If he asks, are you okay? And his partner is totally silent, staring blankly at the wall, he knows she's in phase 1. Shock.
Oh, wow.
If she immediately bursts into tears or starts yelling, she is in phase 2. Reaction. If she starts analyzing what went wrong, she's in phase 3. Processing. He genuinely needs to know where she is on that map so he can tailor his support accurately.
I see the deep logic here. It's like a doctor taking your pulse and checking your blood pressure before deciding what medicine to administer. You wouldn't want a doctor to just blindly inject you with adrenaline if you actually needed a sedative.
Exactly. Matthias is trying to avoid giving the wrong emotional medicine.
Right.
It's highly logical, deeply analytical, and incredibly respectful of the individual's unique timeline of human emotion. He isn't rushing her through the phases.
But, and this is a massive but, we have to look at the emotional erasure this causes for the Ugandan perspective.
Yes, we do.
Let's look at the high-stakes example from the source material. Connie is facing a severe crisis, a residence permit rejection.
The stakes literally could not be higher. The looming consequence is deportation. This isn't a scraped knee or a bad day at work. This is the total upheaval of her life, her geographical stability, her relationship, and her entire future.
Right. It is an objectively devastating reality. The sky is actively falling. And in that terrifying moment, she looks at her partner, the person who is supposed to be her shield and co-survivor, and he says, "Are you okay?"
Which to her feels like an absolute erasure of the trauma.
She calls it a stupid or cold question.
Yeah.
Because from the Ugandan perspective, if the consequence is objectively terrible, sorry is the vital bridge. It says, I see the fire, I know you are burning, I am in the fire with you.
Yes.
Asking if someone is okay when their life is literally being ripped apart by immigration bureaucracy feels like the partner is pretending the pain isn't happening. It feels delusional.
It feels like a denial of shared reality. Connie is essentially saying, I am facing deportation. The threat is obvious and existential. Do not ask me to articulate my trauma phase right now.
Right. Do not treat me like a psychological case study.
Exactly. Just blow on the wound. Just offer the emotional covering.
I want to linger on this, though, because I want to play devil's advocate and defend Matthias for a second.
Go for it.
Let's look at it from his highly logical framework. What if the person facing deportation genuinely is just in the shock phase? Like, they literally cannot process a heavy, emotional, I'm so sorry, this is a tragedy response from their partner yet because their brain hasn't allowed the reality to sink in.
That's a fair point.
Doesn't the Danish question give them a much-needed escape hatch? A way to say, I don't know, I can't talk right now. without being smothered by someone else's heavy empathy.
That is the exact defense Matthias uses, and it is a very valid psychological defense. He does not want to smother her. He does not want to force her to manage his intense empathy on top of her own shock.
Because that would be overwhelming.
Right. If he rushes in weeping and saying, "I am so sorry, our life is ruined," she now has to comfort him or deal with his panic while she is just trying to breathe.
Right. He is trying to keep the space clear for her to react however she needs to. He is offering a lifeboat away from his own emotional weight.
But the cultural divide is so deep that the escape hatch just looks like an abandoned lifeboat.
Oh, an abandoned lifeboat. That's bleak.
She doesn't want an escape hatch to process alone. She wants someone in the bunker with her. The Ugandan cultural software dictates that isolation during a crisis is the worst possible outcome.
Even if the person needs space.
Yes, because empathy, even if it's heavy and overwhelming, is proof of presence. Matthias's attempt to give her space is interpreted as him leaving the room entirely.
This is such a profound disconnect. Think about the last time you received genuinely terrible news. A sudden job loss, a frightening medical diagnosis, a deep betrayal.
Right.
In that exact moment, when the floor fell out from under you, what did your nervous system crave? Did you want someone to just grab you, hold you tightly and say, "I am so, so sorry"? Or did you want them to give you space, sit quietly across the room and let you figure out how you felt before imposing their reaction on you?
It's a crucial question to ask yourself, because your answer likely reveals the cultural and familial software you were raised with.
Definitely.
Neither response is objectively right or wrong in a vacuum. But to the person experiencing the crisis, receiving the wrong response feels like a profound betrayal of trust.
It really does. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because everything we just talked about, the scraped knee, the visa rejection, was an external crisis.
Right. These are things happening to the couple from the outside world.
But what happens when the crisis is caused within the relationship? What happens when one partner is the direct cause of the other partner's pain?
Ah, yes. This changes the rules of engagement entirely.
This brings us to the ultimate test of the deep dive. This is the climax of the philosophical conflict between Connie and Matthias. We were talking about shared accountability and what the sources brilliantly call the equality trap.
The legal and financial example. This is where the theoretical differences between empathy and autonomy crash violently into real-world consequences.
Let's set the stakes for this scenario exactly as the sources lay it out. A wife needs an expensive lawyer for a case that deeply affects both of them.
Right, it is a shared life consequence. Perhaps an immigration issue, a housing dispute, or a financial liability.
The husband, acting as her partner, is obligated to pay for this lawyer. He has the funds, he agreed to do it, but he fails to execute. The deadline passes, the money isn't transferred, the ball is entirely dropped.
And because of his inaction, the case is lost or severely compromised. The shared unit has suffered a massive defeat because of his specific failure.
Right, so now the wife is sitting there utterly stressed, facing the severe real-world fallout of a failure that her husband directly contributed to. She is carrying the emotional and practical weight of his mistake.
Now let's inject the Danish mindset of total 50-50 equality into this highly volatile situation.
Okay, brace yourself.
What's fascinating here is how equality can actually be weaponized. The dark side of the Danish autonomy principle is the belief in absolute individual independence.
Okay, what is the internal logic there?
The internal logic is, she is an independent human being. She is my equal. If she needs help managing the stress, or if she needs me to fix something, she will explicitly ask for it.
I respect her too much to treat her like a child who needs to be rescued. She is a capable adult.
Exactly. But the Ugandan mindset, rooted in provision and communal responsibility, expects unspoken action.
Unspoken action.
The partner should see the burden, recognize their direct role in creating it, and instinctively step in to fix it or comfort her. The failure to provide the money should trigger an immediate, overwhelming response to provide emotional and practical repair.
So in the specific scenario where the husband objectively dropped the ball and ruined the case, and if he walks into the room, sees his wife incredibly stressed and uses his default diagnostic tool.
Yes.
If he asks, "Are you okay?" What happens?
It is a massive, catastrophic failure of communication, because in the specific context of shared accountability, asking, "Are you okay?" completely bypasses his own responsibility.
It makes the lost case her individual problem to manage.
Yes. By asking, "Are you okay?" the husband is positioning himself as the detached, empathetic observer of her pain. He is acting like an audience member watching a tragedy unfold on stage.
But he's not the audience. He's the actor who forgot his lines, knocked over the set pieces, and ruined the play.
Precisely. He is a direct contributor to their shared team failure. By skipping the apology and going straight to the diagnostic check-in, he isolates his wife. He turns a we problem into a you problem.
Wow.
He implies that her stress is an individual emotional state that she needs to process, rather than a shared reality that he needs to help resolve.
I think we need to expand on the dropped box analogy from earlier because it fits perfectly here.
Let's do it.
It's like you and your partner are carrying an incredibly heavy box together.
Yeah.
You let go of your side without warning, and the box crashes down on your teammate's foot.
Ouch.
And instead of immediately saying, "Oh my God, my bad, I dropped it," you just lean over, look at their crushed foot and ask, "Is your foot hurting?"
You are entirely skipping the part where you acknowledge that your hands were the ones that let go of the box.
Exactly. You are demanding that they articulate their pain before you acknowledge your role in causing it.
And this is where Matthias, representing the Danish perspective, has a profound realization and completely agrees with Connie.
Oh, he does?
Yes. This is the boundary line where the emotional software has to change. In Danish culture, if you are objectively at fault, if you drop the box, you cannot use do okay.
Really?
It is seen as cowardly. It is seen as a way of dodging accountability under the guise of respecting autonomy.
So the diagnostic tool is thrown out the window. You have to use the other word.
You have to use unskulled.
Unskulled. The Danish word for sorry or I am at fault.
Yes. Unskulled is mandatory here, and we have to understand the weight of this word compared to the Ugandan sorry.
Right, because the Ugandan sorry is an emotional covering. It doesn't imply guilt, it just means, I see your pain.
But the Danish unscaled is the true equivalent of an admission of guilt. It is an acceptance of causality. It says, I am sorry specifically because I failed my part of the obligation. I know I was supposed to pay the lawyer, and because I didn't, we lost. I caused this.
It brings the husband back into the team dynamic.
It does.
This is such a crucial distinction for any relationship. We are constantly contrasting the team, where the burden is shared, where we are in this together, where my failure is our failure, versus the individuals.
Right, the individuals where I respect your space, but your problems are ultimately yours to manage, and my problems are mine.
And in a marriage, or any deep partnership, oscillating between those two states without clear communication is a recipe for deep resentment. I mean, if one person thinks they're playing a team sport and the other person thinks they're competing in a solo event while sharing a locker room, the friction will eventually destroy the connection.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? We've got this incredibly complex web of misunderstandings.
Yeah.
We have two people acting out of genuine love, using the tools their cultures gave them, but causing profound pain to one another.
Yeah.
How do two people operating on such completely different emotional operating systems actually fix the bug in their communication?
We have to move into the final phase of their dialogue, which focuses on bridging the gap and translating the emotional software.
Okay. How do they do it?
That translation process starts with recognizing the ultimate conflict, which is the interpretation of silence.
Silence is so loud in a relationship. It never just means nothing. It always means something.
It is often deafening. Let's look at what silence means to each of them in the wake of a conflict or a crisis. To Matthias, the Dane, his silence, his stepping back, his lack of immediate interference, his waiting for her to speak first, is an active offering of space and respect.
In his mind, it's a gift.
Yeah.
He is giving her the oxygen to breathe.
He is giving her the gift of autonomy. But to Connie, the Ugandan, that exact same silence equals distancing, coldness, and a fundamental lack of care.
It's abandonment.
Yeah.
It is the withdrawal of the emotional covering.
Yes. So they find themselves caught in this terrible loop of resentment.
Oh, I can see that.
She is waiting for a mind reader who will instinctively step up and provide the unskilled or the emotional warmth without being asked. Because to ask would cheapen the love. It would feel like demanding a transaction rather than receiving genuine care.
And he is waiting for what?
He is waiting for an independent, equal partner to explicitly ask for help. Because to intervene unprompted would be disrespectful and presumptuous.
They are both waiting for the other person to push a button that literally doesn't exist on their cultural keyboard.
That is exactly it. So breaking the loop requires active, exhausting, intentional translation. It requires both of them to manually override their deeply ingrained cultural instincts.
What does that actually look like in practice? Because it's easy to say just communicate better, but the mechanics of that are incredibly hard.
For the Danish perspective, Matthias must learn that unskilled accountability and taking ownership of a fault must always precede or do okay when he has dropped the ball.
He can't use equality as a shield anymore.
Exactly. He cannot use the concept of equality as a shield against his own responsibility. He has to step out of the detached diagnostic role and re-enter the shared reality of the team.
Right. You have to admit you dropped the box before you ask about the crushed foot. You have to establish that you are a participant, not a spectator.
And for the Ugandan perspective, Connie must learn to explicitly voice her needs.
That sounds hard for her.
It is. She has to override the instinct that says, if he truly loved me, he would just instinctively know what to do. She
Yeah.
has to understand that in his culture, he won't just know.
Because assuming is rude in his culture.
Right. And that his failure to guess her needs is not a lack of love, but a reflection of his respect for her autonomy. She has to realize that asking for what she needs is not a failure of romance, but an act of translation.
This raises a really tough question, though.
What's that?
If both people have to constantly compromise their natural gut-level instincts to make this work, I mean, if Matthias has to force himself to offer an immediate sorry when it feels unnatural to him, and Connie has to force herself to explicitly ask for help when it feels transactional to her, does the new shared language they create actually feel authentic?
That's the million-dollar question.
Are they both just perpetually acting out a script, forcing themselves to say words they don't organically feel, just to keep the peace?
It's a very valid concern, and one that many cross-cultural couples face. It can feel deeply mechanical at first. It feels like wearing shoes on the wrong feet.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
But the profound realization that anchors them and allows the new language to become authentic is recognizing intent.
Intent changes everything.
It does. When Connie truly internalizes that his clinical "are you okay" is not him being cold, but is actually his cultural way of showing deep respect for her mind, the sting goes away. The words might still feel foreign, but the malice is removed.
And for him,
When Matthias realizes that her demand for an immediate sorry isn't a demand for him to grovel or take false blame, but a plea for emotional presence and shared humanity, he can give it freely. The translation moves from the intellectual to the emotional.
it's moving the entire relationship framework from your responsibility and my responsibility to our responsibility.
Exactly. Knowledge is only valuable when applied. Recognizing this cultural programming is merely the first step of the journey. Overriding that programming in a moment of acute anger, fear, or vulnerability is the real, grueling work of love.
It really is. Okay, let's pull all of this together because we have been on quite a journey today, unpacking a staggering amount of psychological and cultural architecture.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We started with the concept of instinctive empathy from the Ugandan perspective, the idea of saying sorry just to blow on a wound, to provide an emotional covering, and to acknowledge our shared human pain without worrying about who caused it.
And we contrasted that with the Danish respect for individual autonomy, where guessing someone's emotion is viewed as an intrusion, and asking, "Are you okay?" gives them the floor to define their own reality.
Then we took a massive detour into macroeconomics, looking at how systems like the welfare state literally decouple love from basic survival over generations, turning romance from an exercise in physical provision and security into an exercise in deep verbal communication and emotional mirroring.
We navigated the highly illogical four-phase timeline of trauma, shock, reaction, processing, reorientation, and explored why a perfectly analytical response can feel like devastating emotional erasure when the stakes are existential.
And finally, we faced the ultimate test of the equality trap. We looked at how asking a simple diagnostic question can inadvertently become a way to avoid shared accountability when someone drops the ball.
Making the Danish unscyled the true admission of guilt, an absolute necessity to maintain the team dynamic.
It is a phenomenal blueprint for anyone trying to understand why their partner, their friend, or even their coworker seems to be missing the point so completely during a conflict.
It teaches us that mismatched words often hide mismatched worldviews.
It forces you to look at your own relationships with a totally new lens. The next time someone in your life asks you, "Are you okay?" when you feel like you are clearly falling apart, or the next time someone immediately says sorry for something they obviously didn't do, I want you to pause before you react.
Think about the software.
Exactly. Consider the emotional software they're running. Ask yourself, are they offering you a blanket, or are they offering you the space to decide if you even want a blanket?
And more importantly, taking a moment of radical self-reflection. Which one did you actually need, and did you communicate that need clearly?
I want to leave you with a lingering thought to mull over, something to kind of chew on after we wrap up here.
I love these.
We spend so much time in our modern culture trying to find ourselves. We take endless personality tests. We go to therapy to analyze our familial traumas. We try to carve out our unique, highly individualized identities.
We tend to treat our personalities as something entirely self-generated, as if we built ourselves from scratch.
Right. But if our deepest, most visceral emotional reactions, how we instinctively show love, how we react to a stranger bleeding on the sidewalk, how we apologize when we drop the ball, how we interpret the silence of the person sleeping next to us,
Yeah.
if all those core human functions are essentially just downloaded software from our society's economic history and welfare systems,
Then how much of your personality is actually yours?
and how much of it is just your culture's tax code talking?
That is a brilliant, unsettling question to end on.
Think about it. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.